Very good. So we began discussing last week the issue of what we call edekiu, which means the status of witnesses, the role that they play in the context of marriage and divorce. And the question that we're investigating is, again, we are all familiar with the requirement of edus, of testimony or witnesses, in a variety of circumstances. The Torah itself speaks about al pishnayim o shlosha edim yakum davar, which means that you need either 2 or 3 on the word of either 2 or 3 witnesses that will, affirm or establish, certain things. So the point is that typically, when we speak of witnesses, we're speaking of a role that they play to verify or to provide evidence where evidence is required. In other words, where there's some sort of a dispute between parties, one person or one party says X and the other party say Y. And the question is, how to proceed. Testimony becomes very important. Or if there is a question of, proceeding to another stage where there's some risk, where we're unaware, let's say, of what happened in the past. For example, a woman claims that she is divorced, but she would have to produce the bill of divorce, which is signed by witnesses, if it was signed by witnesses, supposed to be signed by witnesses, or if there was no bill of divorce, then she'd have to provide actual witnesses who had seen the divorce, who had been witness to the divorce. So typically, when we talk about edus, when we talk about testimony or witnesses, we're talking about their role in establishing, that something took place. They are primarily about verification, primarily about evidence, etc. However, what we're trying to determine is whether or not, when it comes to Gittin and Kiddushin, very specifically, maybe there's a different additional role that witnesses play beyond verification. And that is that they lend a certain prestige or a certain formality. They legalize or validate, solemnize, as the case may be, the status of events that are more than what they appear, or whose legal standing transcends simply the physical action that is witnessed. So a marriage, obviously, as well as a divorce, qualify for that kind of status or stature. Maybe you need witnesses not just to determine what happened or what didn't happen, but you may need witnesses as part of the definition to formalize, in other words, to solemnize and to validate the event itself. So what I want to do is begin again with these new Marmakomos that we gave out last week, and try to go through some of the sources to see what the role of Edim are in Ishus. The background for all of this is something that we spoke about last week already, and that is the argument between Rabbeinu Tam and the Rambam that relates to the Gemara that we've been learning on Gittin on Daf, Dalet. So if you look in the Marmakomos here, or if you look at Tosas on Daf Daled Amud Aleph, so it becomes clear. The Tosas says, I'll give you the on the Marmakomos, it's 5 lines up from the bottom of the page. It's on page 1. It's the second entry, and you have to go up 5 lines. So the Tosas says, "V'o derugel Rabbeinu Tam lomar, v'afil Rabbi Meir, boy edim b'shas nesinas haget. The ein davar shebe'erva pachos mishnayim." So what that means is that Rabbi Tam used to say, obviously this was an issue that came up, or didn't come up practically because he's talking about Rabbi Meir, paskin like Rabbi Meir, but Rabbi Tam used to explain that in his opinion, Rabbi Meir's view, Rabbi Meir is the one who says, Ede Chasima Karsi, which means what makes a get is the signatures on the bill of divorce. Even if the witnesses don't actually see that divorce decree handed over to the wife. So that's called Ede Chasima Karsi, and that's good enough from a get point of view. That's a proper get according to Rabbi Meir. We don't paskin like Rabbi Meir, but that's Rabbi Meir's view. So, but Rabbeinu Tam says when it comes to the actual divorce, not to the status of the get, the bill of divorce, but the actual effect of the divorce itself, if all you have are edim signed on the document, and they themselves were not present when the get was handed over, then that would not be a proper gerushin. That's what Rabbeinu Tam means in these words. Again, 5 lines up from the bottom of entry number 2. Afilo Rabbi Meir, even Rabbi Meir who says Ede Chasima Karsi, boy edim b'shas nasinas haget, needs edim at the time of the handing over of the get. The ein davar shebe'erba pachos mishnai, because gittin is a huge change in status, and as such, it needs to be witnessed by what we call Ede Kiyum. So even Rabbi Meir, who says Ede Chasima Karsi, would require Ede Kiyum in addition, who were present at the actual handing over of the get, of the action of the gerushin. Everybody with me so far?
So what's the difference between Ede Kiyum or Ede Masir? I'm trying to understand.
So there is no difference in practical terms, meaning any aid who is an aid Masira is present when the get was actually handed over, which is when the Maisa Gerushin was done. Just that the term Ede Masira is something that we associate with the argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Eliezer says Ede Masira Karsi, Rabbi Meir says Ede Chasima Karsi, and that argument is not about the principle of Ede Kiyum, it's about the status of the shtar, of the get, of the actual bill of divorce itself. But any aid who's there at the time of the Mesiras Haget, let's say according to Rabbi Eliezer, this question, in a classical Rabbi Eliezer Ede Masira Karsi case, this question wouldn't get off the ground because of what you're saying, which is, well, the Ede Masira can double as Ede Kiyum. But we wouldn't call them Ede Masira because we want to signify that the function that they're serving is not about the shtar, it's about the get, about the gerushin, about the act of gerushin. Is that clear?
It's a little bit more helpful, but again, if you hold,
I'll highlight for it, and I'll highlight it to you in a slightly different way as well. A get can only be done with a shtar, with a gerushin can only be done with a get. However, as we know, kiddushin, most kiddushin are not done with a shtar, right? They're done with kesef, in matbeya, a ring, right?
Correct.
So the principle of Ede Kiyum is something that extends, not only extends, the source of Ede Kiyum is really in a case of kiddushin, and of course in a case of kiddushay kesef. So if you need Ede Kiyum, you need witnesses to be present when the ring is handed over and the question is popped, Harayat Mukudeshesli, when he asks or states that he wants to marry her, you need the witnesses to be present at that moment. There's no shtar.
For you mean for the marriage, not you mean Mukudeshesli when they're getting married, not engagement, right?
Well, kiddushin is married. It's the first stage of marriage. There are 2 stages.
Okay.
But it's not shidduchim. It's not like what we call engagement.
Yes. Okay. I just want to be clear.
But the point I'm trying to make is the same Adam that you require. We're wondering about the Adam that you require when the chassan gives the kala a ring and says Harayat Mekudeshesli. Do you need that kind of Ede Kiyum and Gerushin for the act of Gerushin? Now they would be there, b'shas Masira, but we just wouldn't call them Ede Masira because that's a term that we associate with the status of the hefts of the get, not so much with the potentially additional requirement of the Maisa Gerushin. But if Gerushin can only take place with the get, so we're calling it, saying, even according to Rabbi Tam was basically saying, even according to Rabbi Meir, who says Ede Chasima Karsi, you need Ede Chasima Karsi, you need Ede Masira, but you don't need them as Ede Masira. You need them as Ede Kiyum.
So that's a disconnect. In other words, I'm trying to understand if they're Ede Kiyum, what does that really mean different than Ede Masira? To me, it's like changing words. At the end of the day,
it's changing words because they signify two different requirements, even though there's if you had Ede Masira, Bin Masira, they're also Ede Kiyum. And if you had Ede Kiyum, they're also Ede Masira. But what we're signifying is two different principles. One is something about the needs of the document. That's called Ede Masira. The Rabbi Eliezer says Ede Masira Karsi is saying the document needs the presence of witnesses when it's handed over. Otherwise, it's not a proper document. And when we talk about Ede Kiyum, we're not talking about the document. We're talking about the act that the document is used for, namely the Gerushin. That's why I just gave you the example. In Kiddushin, we don't have a shtar.
But I'm saying,
but you still need Ede Kiyum. Right?
But what I'm saying is, if the document is inaccurate, right? Let's just say it's inaccurate, then the Ede Kiyum.
It's not according to a mayor. It's not inaccurate. According to a mayor, Ede Chasima Karsi. So all you need is the witnesses to sign. The document is perfect, but there's still another requirement potentially, and that is that forget about the document. The act of Gerushin needs to be witnessed for the purpose of Ede Kiyum, even though the document is perfect. In the same way that there is no document in Kiddushay Kesed.
So they're really
Ede Kiyum, right?
So just to be clear, so they're really arguing. Just in other words, the one who says Ede Masira holds that the whole thing happens at the Masira, and the one who holds
Ede
Masira
about the get is saying if you don't have witnesses seeing the conveying of the get, then it's not a get. Not that it's not a gerushin. Of course, it's not a gerushin if it's not a get. But you don't even get to the point the document is incomplete. Let's say you do a transaction, right? And let's say there are two aspects of the transaction. One is the documents, and the other is the act of that you do with the documents.
Right.
So the point is, Ede Masira and Ede Chasima are terms that relate to the document, and Ede Kiyum is a term that relates to the presence of witnesses at the time of the action that is using that is employing the document, but not the same. In the same way that Kiddushay Kesef with a ring needs Ede Kiyum too, even though there's no document there.
Right, but what I'm saying is, so
the term Ede Masira is not the right term to use, even though if you have Ede Masira on the get, it'll double serve the function of Edom on the Gerushin as well. But it's just not the right term because legally it's a different idea.
So whether you hold we said this last week, whether you hold the Ede Chasima or Ede Masira, you need Edom when you give over the get, right? Everyone agrees to that.
Right. We're wondering, can the Ede Chasima who aren't physically there, can they also be counted as Ede Kiyum? Or no, since they're not physically there, they don't count for that.
But I mean, how could Ede Chasima be Ede Kiyum if they're not physically there?
So that's what we're trying to explain. So last week we explained that's what we're up to. So last week we tried to explain because that maybe the argument revolves around how Ede Chasima really work. Do they work as virtual Ede Masira? Right, in which case it's as if they're present, or not. I'm not going to go into that. That's what
do they have to be alive? If they're virtual, can they be dead? I'm saying, do they have to be? They could be dead also, and it works.
Sure, because once they signed on the document, and they signed for its accuracy, it's still their testimony. You could take their testimony to court. Once they can't. they can't be, they have to be, you have to have a Mesiras Haget at some point. But whenever there's a Mesiras Haget, then the Eidei Chasima, even if they're no longer alive after that point, are going to be made on the get.
I understand the Eidei Chasima made on the get. To me, it sounds very creative that they could not be there and be
Right.
Eidei Kiyum, and then also they don't have to be alive and they could still be Eidei Kiyum. Like that seems like a big stretch.
Right. So they probably do have to be alive if they're going to function as Eidei Kiyum. They have to be alive at the time of the Masira. But they certainly don't need to be physically there if they're going to work in that way. So this is, what I'm trying to explain is this is an argument between Rabbeinu Tam and the Rambam, two top, authorities.
Yes.
There are basically two ways to explain the argument. Last week we explained it one way. Now I want to switch to the other way. The way we explained it last week was in context of discussing whether the Eidei Chasima that work according to Rabbi Meir, who says Eidei Chasima Karsi alone, are they identical conceptually with the way that Eidei Chasima work according to the Rif and the Rambam, who think that even Rabbi Eliezer, who says Eidei Masira Karsi, also accept Eidei Chasima. So the Ran says they accept Eidei Chasima, but they accept it as virtual Eidei Masira, because once the woman has received the get, right? So then, because the Eidei Chasima are effective in establishing that there was a proper Masira of a proper get, right? So in a way, they're virtual. They're Eidim. The Masira is covered by their, by their Chasima, which makes them attest to the Masira. That's what we discussed last week. What I want to discuss now is a different take on the whole issue. And that is whether or not Eidei Kiyum, which is what we're talking about, is qualitatively a different kind of Eidus to begin with, or is it really just like a regular Eidus with the one added caveat that we require it? So let me explain. When we talk about Eidus in most contexts, as I said before, we're talking about evidence. We're talking about proof, we're talking about verification, right? Why do you need to bring, witnesses to court? Because you have a dispute with your friend, or your partner or your neighbor. There are two different, versions, of what took place, which has legal ramifications. And, the best way to prove it is if somebody has witnesses, right? So the major role for Eidim is witnesses. It's evidence. It's verification. So is that the role also in Kiddushin? But if that's the case, why would it be necessary? Let's say you wanted to risk it. Let's say we want to get married, right? But we're willing to, we will do the ceremony. We'll do everything, properly, but without witnesses. We're willing to, I would say, somebody wakes up in a week or in a month or in a year and says, and denies the whole thing, the husband or the wife. We're willing to risk it. We think, that we believe each other, etc. Would that be good enough or not? And if not, why not? So that's the Gemara in Masechet Kiddushin that I want to go and discuss now. So really what I'm trying to develop is whether Eidei Kiyum that are required, let's start with Kiddushin, right? Let's forget about Shtar for the moment. We'll get back to the Shtar and the Rabbeinu Tam and the Rambam in a few minutes. But let's say in a regular wedding that we all go to, we all attend, a regular wedding. So we know that there's a requirement of witnesses. What role do these witnesses play? They're called Eidei Kiyum. What role do they really play? So the Gemara in Kiddushin, Samachei Amud Beis, discusses whether B'kadesh b'fnei Eid Echad Choshim l'Kiddushin or not. If you get married in the presence not of two witnesses, but one, would that be, on any level, is that effective or not? Because if it's effective, even as a suffix, even as a doubt, then you should require a get, right? Meaning if you wanted to dissolve a marriage that was done in the presence of a single witness, if you're really concerned about it, you'd have to get a get. Okay, everybody with me?
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying you could ask this question by a million cases. I don't know why we're picking this.
What do you mean?
Let's say the ksuba has only 1/8. Let's say a get has 1/8. I'm saying, where do
no,
you draw the
get-
line here?
Right. No, so that's exactly the point. If you and I, well, we'll see in a moment in the Gemara. Let's say you and your partner decide to split up your partnership and decided to do it without witnesses, but you both agree that it happened. Did it happen?
A partnership doesn't have a rule. You need 2/8. There's no requirement that to divide a partnership, you need 2/8. If both partners agree that they divided the partnership, then that should be sufficient.
Okay, so that's what the Gemara's discussion is in a minute. We'll get to that. That's
but that's different when the Torah requires 2/8.
Right.
The Torah says you need 2/8 to marry someone.
Well, we don't know that it requires that. We're trying to figure that out.
We don't know that it requires that? Okay.
No, in other words, you may know the maskana of the Gemara, but until the Gemara came to that conclusion, it didn't know it definitively, right?
We're going back in time as if we don't know, and we're trying to figure out how we learned that.
What do you mean we're going back in time? We're studying the Talmudic discussion where this is determined. If that means that we're going back in time,
that you need 2/8.
Every Tuesday night we're going back in time.
Right. Okay. in a certain way, but the fact that we asked if 1/8 works sort of is undermining the process. Okay.
It's a discussion in the Gemara. Basically, you're asking me, you're saying, how could that be a discussion in the Gemara? We know that we need it. Sure, we know we need it because that's the conclusion of this discussion.
I'm saying you could ask that by any case where the Torah says you need 2. You could always ask what happens if you have 1 by every single case. Not just this case.
So the question is whether or not, but we don't ask it by every single case because normally we understand that the purpose of witnesses is to solve a dispute. Obviously, what the Gemara is really asking is, is there a requirement when it comes to Kiddushin beyond solving a dispute or not? And the Gemara is going to end up saying there is, but the Gemara is not, going to explicitly tell us what that's all about. That's what we're going to try to explore.
Okay, I look for.
So the Gemara says, "My haba Allah." The original Gemara on Samachem and Aleph, the Gemara actually asks this question. The Gemara says, "Hamakadesh." I'll read you I'm reading the parts that's not on the page. Hamakadesh bifnei echad choshesh l'kiddushin or ein choshesh l'kiddushin. If you get married in the presence of one witness, right? Are we concerned about that? Do we need l'chumra? Do you need a get for that or not? That's what the Gemara wants to know. Now, again, it's good that this conclusion of this Gemara, which we'll get to, but that's the Gemara's question. Now, when the Gemara was asking that question, it was weighing the possibility that the role of witnesses in Kiddushin is not fundamentally different than it is in the breaking up of a partnership. But the question is, what will it conclude, right? So then the Gemara goes back and forth and forth and back. Then the Gemara says, "My haba Allah."
I understand. Kiddushin, you're creating a partnership, and to me, you should be comparing it to breaking a partnership to Gittin. I don't even understand the analogy. Comparing breaking a partnership to Kiddushin.
If you create a partnership,
yes,
between two people, do you need witnesses for that?
No, because that's not a Torah requirement. Torah doesn't care if you have a partner or not. You're not getting a partner because the Torah tells you. The Torah tells you to get married.
But you were just asking me, saying it was a bad comparison because you wanted. I was just giving you an example. It doesn't make a difference.
No.
Transaction.
No. I was saying disrupting a marriage would be equivalent in my mind to disrupting a partnership. I'm saying comparing disrupting a partnership to getting married to me is going in opposite ways. To me.
The bigger point is that a partnership is a monetary transaction, and
correct,
it's a practical union. Whether it's creating the partnership or dissolving the partnership, the role of witnesses is identical in both. And in the conclusion of the Gemara, neither of them requires the presence of witnesses. If there's a dispute, you might require witnesses to resolve it, but absent a dispute, there's no validating requirement not to create a partnership and not to terminate a partnership. With regard to Kiddushin, the Gemara here in Kiddushin Samachem and Beis, Samachem and Aleph and Samachem and Beis, is not talking about Gerushin, it's only talking about Kiddushin for the moment. We'll discuss Gerushin going forward. Let's assume for the moment that, which both Rishonim do, that it's the same, but we'll discuss that. The Gemara is wondering whether or not the rules are different in Ishus. In Ishus, do you need a validating presence in addition to a verifying presence or not? That's the question. So the Gemara goes back and forth. And then the Gemara says, okay, there are different views in the Gemara. My havala. They're saying like you, like, what's the psak halacha? How do we rule? Says the Gemara, Rav Kahana Amar, Ein choseshin l'kiddushin. We paskin that if there aren't two witnesses, the kiddushin is invalid. Rav Papa Amar, Rav Papa disagrees. He says choshen l'kiddushin. He says no. I think that even if there are no witnesses, and certainly if there's one witness, then not that the kiddushin is fully binding, but choshen, meaning we're worried about it. It might be binding, and therefore you would need a get in order to move away from that marriage. Amalei Rav Ashi l'Rav Kahana. So then Rav Ashi turned to Rav Kahana, who said, Ein choshen l'kiddushin, which is how we paskin, meaning absent two witnesses, there's no kiddushin. So he said to him, my daitech, he said, I don't understand your view. Why? The yolf is davar mimamon. Why do you think that you need two witnesses to validate a kiddushin? Right, Jacob, you said a second ago as if it was, obvious. It's in the Torah. Is it in the Torah? I mean, the answer is it's not explicit in the Torah, and there's a debate in the Gemara whether it's implicit in the Torah or not. So Rav Ashi said to Rav Kahana, I don't get it. You're thinking that you need two witnesses. Where'd you come up with that? Because it says davar, yakum davar, and it also says davar shebe'erva. So the word davar in both places, the yalf is davar mimamon. That means that the source for requiring witnesses in a marriage stems from the requirement of witnesses in civil law cases, in choshen mishpat, in mamon. But if that's the case, says Rav Kahana, imala halano dos baldin kemedim dami, avkan who dos baldin kemedim dami. If that's the case, then it shouldn't, if you're comparing ishus to mamon, and that's why you require two witnesses, then you should also compare it with respect to relying upon the acknowledgement of the parties themselves. So in Dine Mamanis, right? If Bob and Bill say that they entered into a partnership, right? Or if Bob and Bill say that they broke up their partnership, we believe them, correct? Because there's no validating need for witnesses, and we believe them because Hodas Baldin Kemedim Dami. They're the Bali Dvarim, they are the protagonists, they're the affected parties. And Hodas Baldin, when they say something that has implications for themselves, we believe them. Says the Gemara, why don't you say the same thing by Kiddushin? If the requirement of witnesses comes from Davar Shebemamon, then why don't we say that Hodas Baldin Kemedim Dami works? Meaning, if the husband and the wife both acknowledge that they got married, why isn't that enough? Just like it's enough in Choshen Mishpat, which is where we're deriving the requirement of two witnesses. Everybody understand the question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty creative question. So, I mean,
it's not so creative. It's very logical. Meaning, if you're comparing the legal requirements of ishus to civil law, then be consistent about it. That's what the Gemara is saying.
I mean, it's not equal. First of all, you have Erev, you have Whereas by marriage, if the woman's with someone else, that there's all kinds of, like in partnerships. I mean,
Wait, okay, so be
it's not
patient.
apples to apples. I mean, to
Well,
me, it's
we have to prove that it's not apples to apples. So that's going to be the next line in the Gemara. So the Gemara is, but this is what you have to look at very, very carefully now. So the Gemara says, Amalei, the difference is as follows. Hasam, I think this is partly what you're trying to suggest. Hasam lo kachayiv lachrini. Hacha kachayiv lachrini. What does that mean? The Gemara says, in civil law,
right.
it's
You
just
can have 100
parties.
partners, right?
So if they agree that they each one, there are liabilities, but their liabilities are personal, each one vis-a-vis the other. So if they both agree that this took place, that's all you need. But when it comes to Ishus, other people in the world are affected as well. Now, who are those other people? We'll get to that in a minute.
The sibling.
Rashi says, I'll just give you Rashi for
her sister, her mother.
Rashi says it means family members.
Yes.
Which is what you're saying, right? Look at Rashi. If you look at the third entry on page number 1, or if you have a Gemara Kedushin, you can look all there as well. Rashi says, Rashi says, Lo kachai lachrini, eno chav la'acherim b'hoda'asazu in civil law, she'ein nifsad elahu. He's the only one who's affected. But hacha kachai lachrini in ishus, in marriage, shekrovo seha nesrubo, ukrovav nesarin ba. When two people get married, they're not the only people that are affected by this, right? Other people are affected too. His relatives, her relatives, they're all affected. And therefore, we don't apply the din of Hodas Baldin Kamedim Dami, because that makes sense when everybody who's committing are the only ones who have any kind of negative fallout or any detrimental consequences. But if the admission affects other people, then we don't rely on them, because who are they to be believed about things that impact other people? Okay, so that's a distinction that the Gemara makes. Now the question is how to understand how expansive is that different? Is that explanation? Okay.
Just one question. So we asked, or the Gemara asked, would say that if 1/8 is there, do they need a get by Kedushin? Is there a question if there are no Eidim there? Does anyone ask the question?
Yes.
If that
in
will come
the
up?
original Gemara, it seems like that there's a question. Is it only, are we, like when the Gemara says, when the Gemara originally says, Imala halano dos baldin kamedim dami afkano dos baldin kamedim dami, so many of the Mefarshim point out, then you wouldn't even need Eida Echad. Right?
Right, that's where I'm going. So that question would apply even if you don't have 1/8.
Correct.
The same logic would apply.
So it's almost like even if there's an Eid Echad in Choshishin, but if Choshishin, maybe that would be even in, with no Eidim because of
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's a good point. Anyways, I'm just going to, before I get back to this major point, I'm just going to read you the next Gemara because we talked a little bit about it anyway. The Gemara then turns its attention, very interesting. The Gemara says, Marzutra Rav Ada Saba B'nei de Rav Mari Bar Isar, Polig Nichsayu Bahadi Adadi. These two Amoraim had a partnership, and they broke up their partnership. Also, Lakamid Ravashi, they came in the presence of Ravashi, Amrulay, and they said to him, they asked him this question: Al Pishnaim Edim, Al Pishne Edim, Amrachmana, Di Boile Meheder, Lamatzri Hadr Bahu. When the Torah says, that, there's a din of 2 witnesses, does that only mean to say that, if somebody is going to try to get out of their commitment, then it's important to have witnesses, who will establish what the truth is, who will verify, what really took place, or Vanan lo Hadri, and me and, my former partner, Marzutra and Rav Ada, we're honest men and we're not trying to back away from, the statement that we made. We both agree that we broke up our partnership, even though there were no witnesses. Odilma, or is it possible that that even when it comes to civil law, even when it comes to a partnership, you need witnesses to be present in order to formalize the agreement. Now, again, this is something which you thought was inconceivable. But again, what you said is correct, la halacha, because that's the maskana of the Gemara. But it's important not to go back in time, but to go back in time to understand like where these halachos came from, which discussions and how the psak developed. So the Gemara answers, but what the Gemara is asking here, I'll get in a second. So the Gemara answers, Omer lehu lo ibru sahadi el l'shakri. The only reason to have witnesses in civil law is to preclude lying. And that's when you need verification. But the idea that you need witnesses in order to validate something, when there's no question of what took place, that's not true. So what's fascinating here is two things, right? In a way, when you take a step back and you ponder the implications of this Gemara, right? The fascinating thing is the Gemara is wondering, two opposite, interesting, possible ideas. And then in the end, it's concluding, to distinguish. What are the two? It's considering, maybe even Kedushin doesn't need validation. All it needs is verification when there's a dispute, right? Meaning that the only reason you would need witnesses in a Kedushin would be if somebody, is claiming that it didn't happen or didn't happen properly. So then it would be a court case. But otherwise, you wouldn't need them at all. If you had zero aidim or maybe one aid, but maybe even zero aidim and hodas baldin, that would be fine. That's what the Gemara thought, correct?
Yeah.
The Gemara says it's not true. You need validating presence. We still have to get back to why that is. Then in the next Gemara, the Gemara thought something else that we never would have thought.
Well, didn't we answer it because it affects other people with?
Yeah. We're gonna analyze that in a minute. But before the Gemara came to that conclusion, was it considering the possibility that you don't need witnesses other than for verification purposes? Yes.
It seems that way.
Correct. Does the Gemara also not clearly consider the possibility that in monetary matters, you would need Adam to validate, even if there was no dispute?
In monetary matters, you would need Adam? I thought we agreed.
The Gemara was considering. That's the question that Mar Zutra and Rav Ada Saba asked Rav Ashi.
That for every partnership you shouldn't have require two Adam? Is that what that's
in order to validate you're probably creating or dissolving. That's what the Gemara was wondering. Correct?
I mean, it's a stretch, but
it's not a stretch that they were wondering about.
No.
That's what the Gemara was at. That's what they asked. They made an appointment. They went to Rav Ashi's base medrash.
One second. There's Exeris Akasav by Kedushin, right?
Whoa. Who said it's Exeris Akasav?
Well, you said before
I didn't say Exeris Akasav. I said the maskana of the Gemara is that you require two witnesses in all circumstances. And the maskana of the Gemara would come to Dine Mamanis is that you do not unless there's a dispute. But all I'm trying to point out right now is that the Gemara, where this all comes from, is this Gemara here in Samachei B'Beis. If you want to know the source for saying that in Dine Mamanis lo ibri sahadi el l'shakri, which means that in Dine Mamanis we only care about witnesses to validate. But in Dine Ishus, in matters of marriage and divorce, you need Eidei Kiyum. Right. You want to know the source, it's the conclusion that the Gemara has about two different questions, right, in this Gemara that I just read. Correct?
I thought there was a Kiyum we said 10 minutes ago.
No, we said, it says Davar Sheba Mamon.
Davar. Yeah.
That's how you know you need two witnesses. But the Gemara said, if you're learning out from Dine Mamnis, you should only require it if there's a verification problem, not just if there's a Kiyum problem. Then the Gemara said, no, it's Chav Lachrini, it's different. Okay. So this is the Gemara. This Gemara in Kiddushin is the key to understanding this whole problem. The Gemara thought either that you could go in one direction, that everything just depends on verification, mamon and ishus, or that everything requires validation beyond verification, even mamonis. And the Gemara's conclusion was that mamonis is all about verification and that ishus is all about validation. Good?
Yes.
However, one thing remains unclear. And that is, what is the nature of, now we know factually that there's a difference between the role of Eidei Kiyum and the role of what we call Eidei Birur. But now we want to ask the question conceptually, meaning, remember when the Gemara thought that maybe Hodas Baldin would be good enough?
Hodas Baldin Kamedim dummy, or Hodas Baldin in general?
No, Hodas Baldin Kamedim dummy. The Gemara quotes that here.
Right.
So the Gemara says, well, if you learn Davar Davar Mi Mamon, right, just like they in Mamon, Hodas Baldin is Kamedim dummy, Afkan Hodas Baldin is Kamedim dummy. Then the Gemara says, no, it's Chav Lachrini, that's why it's different. Now, there are two ways to read that line. That's what I want to zero in on. One way, how different is it, Lamaskana? Practically, lahalacha, you always require two witnesses at a wedding. If you don't have two witnesses, the wedding didn't take place. But is that because there are other people that are affected, and therefore we're never going to apply the din of Hodas Baldin Kamedim Dami, and we're never going to say, oh, the husband, the wife, they want to risk it. Let's say the relatives don't object. They want to risk it too. Is that the idea? Meaning it's not fundamentally different. The role of Eidim is verification in Ishus too. The only thing is that in Baminis, if you want to, since we have Hodos Baldin Kamedim Dami, so if they want to waive their right for verification, they can do that. But in Ishus, they can't waive the right for verification because there are too many other people, the stakes are too high, there's too many other people involved, and therefore what you need, what Eidei Kiyum really are Eidei Tzorech, are Tzorech Eidei Birur. They are really the need for, you can't play games, you can't take risks, you can't, rely on everybody's honesty, there's too much at stake, you need insurance. Eidus in Ishus, according to this perspective, is an insurance policy. But therefore you always need it. To validate the marriage, you need the witnesses, but not because the witnesses are the validators. It's because if you don't have in your pocket an insured birur, then we're not going to proceed. Understood? That's one way to read the Gemara. There's another way to read the Gemara, which I prefer, and I'm going to try to show you it's a machlokas, and that is, no, what the Gemara was saying was as follows. The difference between Dine Mamadus and Dine Ishus is really fundamental. Once the Gemara introduces the factor of Chav Lachrini, they're not just saying there's no Hodas Baldin, and they're not just saying, therefore, you have to guarantee Birur. What they're saying is the role of witnesses in Ishus transcends Birur. The very fact that Ishus affects other people in the world isn't just the reason that there's no Hodas Baldin. It's a symptom of a much bigger distinction between Ishus and Mamon. And that is that Ishus is a new status. It's a chalos Ishus. The Torah created a certain bond and a certain, consequence to the matrimonial
exclusivity
opinion, as such that the presence of witnesses is a validating aspect, meaning you have to formalize and solemnize. To go from not being married to being married, it's not a question of verifying or guaranteeing verification. It's the witness's presence gives this a certain dignity, a certain stature, and therefore the role of Eidei Kiyum is fundamentally different than Eidei Birur. Not just that you can't risk it. That's the second way to read the Gemara. There are two ways to read the Gemara when it says that the difference is Chav Lachrini. One is in a narrow way, a less ambitious way. It's a way of saying, you know what, they're basically the same idea of Eidus. The difference is in one case, you can risk it. In one case, you can rely on the parties that themselves are, deleteriously affected. And in the other case, you can't. That's the minimal way of distinguishing. Or what I'm saying now, which is what the Gemara is saying is there's no chav lachrini, there's chav lachrini. That means that ishus is not just a physical kinyan. It is it's an institution in Jewish law that you're creating. And that for that institution to get created, you need two witnesses. Okay? That's what we call Eidei Kiyum as opposed to Eidei Bira in a fundamental and a conceptually different way. Everybody with me?
So just to sum up, so in order to make it institutional, it has to have two Edom.
Correct.
Unlike a partnership, we don't need it to be institutional.
Because the partnership is still about it's a web of agreements between parties. And it's about money and ownership. It's about monetary ownership. And Ishus is about Isser
Isser V'heter. And Isser V'heter, you need, we're really saying...
It's the creation of the units of Klal Yisrael. There are many things to say. When we learned Kedushin a couple of years back, talked about, the very long, beautiful bracha that you say under the chuppah, that the Masada Kedushin says under the chuppah, right? Which ends with the words, Mekadesh Amo Yisrael, right? Aidei chuppah v'kiddushin. Chuppah v'kiddushin is a means for Kedushas Yisrael. It's the units of Klal Yisrael, basically. Right? There's the individual, there's the family, and then there's the Shvatim, if you will, and then there's all of Klal Yisrael. So the Gaonim already asked the question. They say, how come when it comes to the mitzvah of getting married, why do you use a language in the bracha, Mekadesh Yisrael or Mekadesh Amo Yisrael, al Yidei Chuppah? It's a strange, very ambitious, very aspirational kind of a language. But the answer is because that's what it is. It's not the agreement between a husband and wife, or the bond between husband and wife is not just. It's also about mutual obligations and rights, for sure. And a lot of that is spelled out in the Ksuva. But it's more than that. It's really about creating an existential bond and an entity that affects other people and that, is transformative in family life and in the, and in the components of what make up Klal Yisrael. So the idea that you would require Eidim not just to verify, but, to be present, to kind of symbolize the formal creation of this institution makes sense. So if that's the case, now I want to get back to Rabbeinu Tam and the Rambam. But then I want to expand to other things. So basically everything I'm saying today or adding today comes from this Gemara in Kiddushin, where the Gemara weighs the concept. This is the Gemara that speaks about Eidei Kiyum. But what I'm trying to show is that the Gemara's distinction, Chav Lachrini, not Chav Lachrini, can be understood in two ways. One way, which makes the second way, which makes Eidei Kiyum fundamentally different than Eidei Birur, makes it a validating, solemnizing, formalizing apparatus. The other way, which says, no, the gap between Eidei Kiyum and Eidei Birur is really not that great at all. It's just that Eidei Kiyum is another way of saying you have to be able to guarantee Eidei Birur. You can't, normally Eidei Birur is a luxury. If you want to, rely on the other person's honesty, then so be it. But here, in this context, it's a different story. Here, what we're saying is Chav Lachrini. But are we changing how we look at Eidos? No, not at all. Okay? That's where we are. Now, what does this have to do with Rabbeinu Tam and the Rambam? So I think Rabbeinu Tam is taking the second view. Rabbeinu Tam is saying, listen, what are Eidei Kiyum? And Jacob, I think this is why viscerally, right, you were, you were discounting, or dismissing, out of logic, out of passion maybe, the position of the Rambam, right? Because I think this is what Rabbeinu Tam is thinking as well. Rabbeinu Tam is saying, listen, Eidei Chasima sign on the document, right? And they're also provide evidence in the end of the day. If the get is Yotze, Mitachas Yado Isha, if the woman has the get and it's signed, even if the Eidei Chasima were not present when it was given over, it still provides enough evidence that it was given over and that there was a gerushin. But what's missing is you don't have the actual presence of the Eidim at, living, breathing, physical, solemnizing, validating, symbolic presence. They're not there. So how could that be Eidei Kiyum? Right? And therefore, even according to Rabbi Meir, even though the shtar, the get part as a shtar is fine, but you still need Eidei Kiyum on the Maisa Gerushin, just like on the Maisa Kiddushin. And therefore, what do you need?
Need a Eidei Masira or Eidei
Kiyum. Again, if you had Eidei Masira, they would also serve as Eidei Kiyum. We just wouldn't call them Eidei Masira, but they would be the same thing. But Eidei Chasima, which is Rabbi Meir's, position, right, they're not going to be good enough for Eidei Kiyum because they're not present.
Correct.
However, according to the Rambam and the Rif, who say that Eidei Chasima are good enough for Eidei Kiyum,
yes,
but the Rambam and the Rif Paskin like Rabbi Eliezer, they say Eidei Masira Karsi. However, they also think that Rabbi Eliezer agrees that if you only had Eidei Chasima, that would also work. Meaning Eidei Masira Karsi, according to the Rif and the Rambam, means either Eidei Chasima or Eidei Masira. Says the Rambam, if you only have Eidei Chasima, if you give it, this is on page 3 in our Mar Makomos. There's the Rambam Perak Aleph Hilchos Gerushin Halacha Tezayin. The Rambam says Chasmo Bo Shnayim. If two people sign on the get, the Av Avinasan La Beino Leveina, and then he hands over this get to the woman, right, with nobody else present, Beino Leveina, only the two of them. Oh, or Shenimsu Eidei Masira Psulim. He handed it over in the presence of Eidei Masira, but they turned out to be, or at least one of them turned out to be pasul. Turns out he was a relative, he was a kadi, he wasn't kosher, whatever. Harezeh kosher. Since our Eidei Chasima, it's good enough. Hoil the Eidim Shabo Ksherim. Since the Eidei Chasima are Ksherim, Harei get Yotzei Bitachas Yada, that's good enough. And then he quotes the Gaonim, Yesh Shahorim Min HaGaonim Shehu Pasul. That's the
just to be clear, if you hold the Eidei Chasima, do you need a Masira at all? Let's say you never give it.
Yes.
So they're arguing what, but you need to have Masira.
Yes. But the Rambam, so this is where the Rambam says that if you have Eidei Chasima alone, that'll serve the function of Eidei Kiyum. How do you know the Rambam requires Eidei Kiyum? Go on the top of the page. That's Halacha Yud Gimel. Minayim sheitnen ala bifnei eidim. How do you know that the get has to be given in, with the presence of witnesses? Harei omer al pishnayim eidim moshlosh eidim yakum davar. V'yefshar shetia yom ha'erva. It's impossible that today she is prohibited from any relationship with anybody but her husband. And that's a capital offense. And tomorrow she'll be, permissible to be involved with anybody. Therefore, if she gave a get, if the get was given with no one present, but then in Halacha Tazayin, he says that's if there's no Eidei Chasima. But if there are Eidei Chasima, then they will serve the function not only as Eidei Haget, but Eidei Hagerushin. They will be the Eidei Kiyum against Rabbeinu Tam. So how could that be? But the answer is maybe there's another way to read, although I'm going to revise this, but maybe there's another way to read the Gemara in Kiddushin, as we explained. The first way, which is what the Gemara was plodding along and thinking, it's not so different than Mamonis, right? Then the Gemara says, but it is different because it's Chav La'achrini. But instead of saying like the second way, the way Rabbeinu Tam read it, which is it's Chav La'achrini, that shows that it's a totally different kind of institution. And therefore it needs not only verifiers, but validators. No. Don't have to interpret that way. The Gemara thought that if the husband and wife both say they got married, you should say, Odas Baldin Kamedim Dami. Says the Gemara, you can't say that because it's Chav Lachrini. And therefore we're not going to rely on Hodas Baldin. And we're not going to rely on their, on their desire to take a risk. We don't accept that. So what do you need? You need Eidim. But the Eidei Kiyum aren't really Eidei Kiyum, they're Eidei Birur guaranteed. Right? Meaning you're not going to rely on their word. We need to have like objective verification that this ceremony took place because other people are involved as well. So if you could get verification without the physical presence of the Eidim, would that be good enough? Sure, you just need something that isn't like Hodas Baldin. Where do you have that? Eidei Chasima. What are Eidei Chasima? I mean, remember that the Mishnah says that even Rabbi Eliezer says you should have Eidei Chasima as a tikkun olam. Why? Because as a raya, as verification, Eidei Chasima are good according to everybody, even according to Rabbi Eliezer. So if the only reason for Eidei Kiyum is that you need not validation, but you need guaranteed verification, right? Can Eidei Chasima accomplish that even though they're not living and breathing presence at the wedding? Sure. That's what Eidei Chasima do. They provide a raya. So the argument between, let's keep the Rambam out of it because it's more complicated. But let's say the argument between the Rif and Rabbeinu Tam, whether Eidei Chasima can serve the function of Eidei Kiyum, may be the argument separate from what we said last week, which was about how to understand Eidei Chasima according to the Rif. Now we're saying something else. Eidei Chasima are raya. But Eidei Kiyum are also raya. Eidei Kiyum are just the guarantee of raya, according to this perspective. If that's the case, Eidei Chasima is good. But Rabbeinu Tam says, no, you missed the whole point. Eidei Kiyum are the verification of the raya, a guarantee verification. Eidei Kiyum are validation. They're solemnizing presence. Then you need the actual stature of having physical, living, breathing Eidim to be present. Okay, so let's go further with this. Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, I only see names on the screen, so it's like it's hard to read.
Well, Alan Harris is here. Dr. Wegg's here.
No.
Here.
I see. I'm just saying.
I'm present. I'm absorbed by what you're saying, so I'm not speaking.
Oh, that's okay. When you do this, back in the day, about, 40-50 years ago, before before we used to meet live, so you look at people and you can usually tell whether they're
see if
following
they're
right. Right now I'm saying I see the names in boxes in front of me.
You don't see their faces, their eyes. I got it.
Oh, only if somebody reveals themselves. But yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
When will we meet again in person?
That's a great question.
Only Hashem knows. Maybe in next year, Mir Hashem, when the library is ready.
Yeah, you'll let me know. You'll let me know. We'll figure it out. But so is everybody understanding the argument between Rabbeinu Tam and the Rambam? It becomes a very pivotal argument about the nature of Eidei Kiyum. So let's go further with this. Okay. So there's a very interesting argument when we said the key phrase here is Chav Lachrini. Is Chav Lachrini a reason that you need guaranteed verification, or is Chav Lachrini a basis for requiring validation? Correct? Oh. So before we said why is Kedushin Chav Lachrini? What do you mean it detrimentally affects other people? So Rashi says krovim, right? Relatives.
Could you clarify in this context your definition of validation and verification?
Verification is all about proof that something took place because the stakes or the other people who are affected by it or simply the stakes that are involved are such that we're not going to go on the honor system. Sometimes we use the honor system, And sometimes we say, you know what, the stakes are too high. We're not going on the honor system. If you want to, if we need to know that you are, a doctor, let's say, and you have proper, training and knowledge and so on and so forth, we're not going to trust you because you say you know it. We need you to be licensed in order to, because there's too much at stake. So we need guaranteed verification. That's what I mean by guaranteed verification. What I mean by validation is we believe you, or we don't need further proof about what you're saying. However, whatever transaction or ritual or, new status is being created, right? Sometimes you need the formal presence of, an authority figure, a representation of Klal Yisrael, something to give the event or to give the ceremony or to give the status, a kind of, quotation marks, to elevate it, to give it additional stature or to, give it legal validity. So the purpose of the Edom isn't to prove we believe everybody. It's not a question of verification. It's a question of status and stature, and it's a definitional requirement for marriage to take place. There need to be proper witnesses. That presence. It's not that, now they're ready to go to court, in case there's a dispute, so we are safe on the verification front. This is the definition of elevating or assuming like a certain much more, formal status, and part of achieving that symbolically, is having, witnesses there. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good. So what about Chav Lachrini? So Rashi says Chav Lachrini is on page 1. Shekrovosecha nesrba ukrov nesrba. Okay, good. The Rajba disagrees. What does the Rajba say? 1 second. Here. The next piece on page 1 is the Chidush Rajba. Let's go down to the second line. Pirush Rashi Zal, the Kashali, says the Rajba. Ihachi ger ugiores binami mi she'ein lahem krovim sheyasru machmas kiddushein telo mechai b'lachrini nema hodas baldin k'meidim dami. Right? So, I thought that somebody from the crowd was going to ask this question. Meaning, if Chav Lachrini means that there are relatives who are also affected by this decision, right? What happens if you marry somebody who doesn't have relatives? 2 people get married, don't have any relatives or close relatives. Let's say a single child from a marriage marries another single child from a marriage.
Yeah, but they have parents. I don't understand the question.
Let's say the parents are no longer,
Yeah, so you want to create a creative case where they have no relatives, so therefore.
Or Ger to Giora, take the first case of the Rajba. Rajba has 2 cases. One is the people don't have any relatives or who are affected, or a Ger to Gioras. Yeah, if a Ger marries a Gioras, neither of them a family.
But once you create a rule, Vaishas, you need 2. Like you can't necessarily.
So you're saying it's a low plug.
I would say so.
So that's the next line in the Rajba. The Rajba says, "Bim Tomar, lest you say kiven de bialma mechai v'lachrini, af b'mokum de lo mechai v'lachrini, right? Lo mehem now, right? Maybe you'll say because it's not the typical case. There are relatives, so even if there are no relatives, we're not going to allow it. כדי שלא יאמר מי שאין להם קרובים, נאמנס שיש להם אין nemenes. We don't want to start saying also, person doesn't have relatives, we believe him. He does have relatives, we don't believe him. We don't want to make it personal, so we want to make it a low plug. He says, "V'hagabe mamon nami hachi d'mamokim shechov la'cherim ein ne'aman." He said, but even that doesn't make so much sense, because in the end of the day, in Dine Mamonis, we look around and we see if there are chav la'chrini or not chav la'chrini. We don't say it's a low plug. Rajma doesn't like it. I mean, he's suggesting your answer, but he doesn't like it. But let me stop and pause for a minute. It's curious, Jacob, that you liked it. Why? Because you appear to be, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but you appear to be an advocate of what I'm calling approach number 2. The approach that says that Eidei Kiyum are fundamentally different than Eidei Biur, that they're a validating, a defining mechanism, not just a guaranteed verification. Correct?
And therefore,
the best, it shouldn't matter in the end of the day whether there are relatives or there are not relatives, because Chav La'achrini isn't about the particular marriage. It's about the concept of marriage more generally. It goes back to what I said before, which is there are 2 ways to read the Gemara. One way to read the Gemara is that the Gemara is saying,
how's that different than low plug? To me, that sounds like a low plug answer.
No. Low plug is bureaucracy. Low plug means, really, you're right. We should make this distinction. But in law, making certain distinctions becomes a nightmare because people will get confused. And if you don't have a certain consistency, then, you're going to lose the, the ability, to be efficient.
Okay, and this answer is?
This answer is something totally different. We're saying like this. Chav La'achrini isn't a direct factor. It's a way of symbolically proving or demonstrating that Ishus is a transcendental change. It's not just a regular agreement or a transaction.
It's not a business agreement. It's an Isser agreement. But if there's no one,
let's say a ger marries a gioris, is it just the same kind of kedusha marriage as a Jew with 1 million relatives? Sure. So but there's no chayiv la'achrini in that sense. The answer is it doesn't matter, but there could have been. From the Ishus's point of view, if there had been relatives, they would have been prohibited, because it isn't about the impact on the relatives. It's about the fact that there's impact on relatives when there are relatives demonstrates that Ishus is a whole different category of Isser and Heter law.
So the second answer is it doesn't matter if there are people that are affected or not, or they exist. It's basically saying that it's a Isser accomplishment, unlike a monetary accomplishment, and therefore it requires.
And that's symbolized by when there are other relatives, but it doesn't need other relatives, because it's all about, it's proving that the Eidei Kiyum are validators, not verifiers.
So it seems fundamentally what you are saying, Rabbi, is that there is a societal dimension to marriage and divorce.
That there's a what?
A societal, an impact on society and the entire society in relationship to this couple and other members of society. While a monetary discussion or disagreement has mainly a fundamental between 2 parties and does not necessarily affect society.
Well, that's certainly true in what the Gemara is saying. And what you're saying is correct. I'm just adding one other additional point, and that is the societal element isn't just pragmatic. The societal element is part of what demonstrates that what we're dealing with is a halachic, divine, creation, that is sanctified, and that's the reason why it has societal impact. I mean, everybody has to recognize my marriage. We'll see the Rajba's answer in a minute, but that isn't just a practical thing. That's because the bond is not just about rights and obligations between the two of us. It's about a changed status that willy-nilly affects everybody. From the perspective of the rest of the world, she is my wife, I am her husband. That's just a reality. How do you accomplish a reality that has that kind of impact? The answer is you need a halachically validating mechanism for that, edus. But whether even a ger and a gioras have the same kedushas ishus as two members of the most prolific clans, it doesn't make it. It's the same ishus. Now, in one case, lemaisa, there's a brother, there's a sister-in-law. It affects them. In the other case, there's no brother and sister-in-law because it's a ger and a gioris. But it doesn't matter because it isn't about the effect. The effect was a way of gauging or demonstrating, right, how ishus is just a totally different, kind of status than shutfus is, or any other transaction. You understand?
Yes.
Oh. Now, by asking this question, in a way, the Rajba is tipping his hand. It sounds like he doesn't sign on to the validating approach. It sounds like he's into the verifying. Right? But let's see what his answer is. What is his own answer? Umistabra, says the Rajba, Dehachi Perusha, Mechai Belachrini, Dinesra Kula Alma Bahoda Asa, Zu, the Einacha Modash and his Kadsha, She'ena Mechayeva Sacherim. Rajba says, you need some sort of a pragmatic effect because he's working with verification, guaranteed verification, but still verification. So what about a ger and a gioris? He doesn't want to say low plug. He's not saying what I'm saying about this validating idea. So what's his answer? He says, forget about the family members. Any person who would want to marry her or have a relationship with her is still affected by the marriage. Ish. Who says it has to be family member? Now, the truth is that answer might have worked even, for the other perspective. But the point is that the Rajba is really troubled by Rashi's interpretation. I believe Rashi would have said to him either low plug, right, like Jacob wanted to say, or I prefer, he would have given my answer, which is Chav Lachrini is an exemplification, right? It's an encapsulation of the fundamental difference between Eidus Ishus and Eidus Mamonis. It's not about actually having the Hechetimtzi, the pragmatic application of Chav Lachrini. Okay. So we're going to see in a couple of minutes if we make it that long today. So we're going to have to stop. So I'm going to tell you, we're going to finish with this next week, Mir Hashem. But let me tell you two other, before we get to the second Rajba, I'm going to tell you a Ritva, which I started telling you last week in a different context, but I'm going to tell it to you quickly. Then we'll read it next week. When you go to a wedding and you have to have witnesses at the wedding.
Exclusive. You say exclusive, like Rosal Matrix, is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, that's what I started talking about last week.
Right.
So so I mentioned that, when I do a wedding, I always insist that the chassan appoint the witnesses to the exclusion of all others. And that was Matrix used to do that. Many people. Where does it come from? So it comes from the Ritva. If you look on page 2, but I'm not going to read it in because we're already out past our time. The Ritva in Kiddushin Mem Gimel Amud Aleph quotes it in the name of the Ra'ah. The Ra'ah was a Talmud of the Ramban, Rabbi Aaron Halevi from Barcelona, right? Everybody familiar with Barcelona in Europe? So Barcelona, part of Catalonia. So Barcelona was the city of the Rajba, and of the Ra'ah, Rab Aaron Halevi. He was the Rajba and the Ra'ah were like the prized students of the Ramban. The Ritva was a student of both the Rajba and the Ra'ah, but what people don't fully appreciate, much more of the Ra'ah than the Rajba. So many, we don't have so much of the, like we have voluminous material from the Rajba. The Rajba wrote thousands of responsa and, many chidushim on many masachtas. The Ra'ah wrote on what's called Torah Sabayis. He wrote a critique on the Rajba's Torah Sabayis, which is very important for Isra V'Heter. And he wrote on certain masechtas for sure that we have, Ksubis and Brachos and, a couple of others. But mostly, we don't have the full regimen of the Ra'ah's writings. But the Ritva is like an important conduit to the Ra'ah. Anyways, we'll read it inside next week. But this idea of being miyached edim at a wedding really was rejected mostly by the Balei Tosas. Balei Tosas said, you don't really need it. Why do you need it? The goal of it is to make sure that the krovim and the psulim, which we discussed a little bit last week, that the relatives or people are not kosher edim, if they think that they're witnesses or other people think they're witnesses, it could create a problem. The Balei Tosas say it's not a problem really, because the definition of an aid, of a witness, is when you go to Bezdin, if there's a court case, he becomes an aid when he comes to Bezdin. So the problem of Eidah Shabbat L'Mitzasa, Batla Kula, say Balei Tosas, is only at court, not when you actually see the event.
So according to Tosfos, anyone at the wedding could go to court?
Could what?
Could anyone?
No, you still need witnesses, but there'll be no problem of Eidah Shabbat L'Mitzasa just because they're there.
No. What I'm saying is, you said you're Rabbi, and you say two exclusive of others.
Yeah.
So
these Balei Tosas wouldn't require it.
Right. So I'm saying the Balei Tosas don't require it because they say Edom is all about when you go to court, right? When you have to testify. So what I'm asking is, according to Balei Tosas, could other people at the wedding be the Edom?
No.
Could they go to court?
Could they go to court
if they were married?
You still need two witnesses.
Could any two at the wedding?
Correct.
Because when you do a wedding, you know who your two are, so no one else can go to court. According to Balei Tosfos, can other people go to court?
If people go to court, but they don't go to court, as part of the same. If some people are there and they don't go to court, it's never going to be a problem about them. Put it that way. If they go to court, different groups go to court, that might be an issue. That depends on the Gemara and Makos, but the idea that you have to specifically at the time of the wedding be miyached edim, according to Balei Tosas, is not true. So why did the Ra'ah require it, which he did? Because the Ra'ah had the following fascinating idea. The Ra'ah said, you know what, the Balei Tosas, let me go back a step, and I'll finish this anyway in a minute. Rashi and in Makos and Davam and Aleph and the Rashbam and Baba Basra are both of the opinion against Balei Tosas. They think Eidos is defined by Re'iyah, when you see the event, not Haggadah. Balei Tosas disagree with the Rashi and the Rashbam, and they say no, only the Haggadah. According to Rashi, even in Dinei Bamanis, when two people witness a halva, there can be a problem of Eidah Shabbat L'Mitzasa Batla Kula, because Shas Re'iyah is the key moment, according to Rashi and the Rashba. Now, that's the background. Came the Ra'ah comes into this discussion and said, the Ra'ah says, in my opinion, there's a fundamental difference, listen to this, between Eidei Kiyum and Eidei Birur. Meaning, Edom whose function is verification, says the Ra'ah, I agree with Balei Tosas and I agree with the Ramban, which is that the critical moment of the Eidos is what? Bezdin, Haggadah bezdin. However, he says, that's what makes Eidei Kiyum unique. Eidei Kiyum isn't like Eidei Birur. What is Eidei Kiyum? It's the physical formalizing presence, validating presence of the witnesses. The fact that they're there lends stature to the event. They're not there to testify later if you need them. That's not their function. What is their function? To be present. So what's the critical moment for them? Coming to court or actually being there?
Say being there.
Being there. Says the Ra'ah, in my opinion, Rashi and the Rashbam are right when it comes to Eidei Kiyum. Tosas and the Ramban are right when it comes to Eidei Birur. So when it comes to a wedding, which is Eidei Kiyum, if you weren't miyached the Eidim, you'd have a problem of Eidei Shabbat L'Mitzasa Bat L'Gula. But what's it based on? Yeah, I'm just going to read one line and then we'll stop. It's, if you see here, the Kiddush Ritva, Kiddush Mem Gimel Amid Aleph. Go to the second line. No, third line. Aval b'kiddushin deleka l'meimer kol chad mehani lo b'ina natamed v'chein hilchasam miu. Kol hecha sheyesh ba'oso maimed ksherim upsulim. There's 4 lines down. Whenever in a wedding you have present ksherim and psulim, o krovim, or relatives. Typically, you do have relatives at a wedding. Tzarich liyached eidei hakiddushin. You have to exclusively appoint the witnesses, which is why we do it. Why? The ilochein, dilo, if you don't, even the ika aid pasul beineim, since there is a disqualified aid among them, edus kulam betela. Yafagav the omer lemechse asina, even if they say lemechse asina, we came just to look, we have no intention of ever going to court to verify. The chi amrinan hasam, the amrinan lemechse asisun al asido asisun, the omer lemechse asina tiskayim edus b'shar. When do we say we don't care about their status at the time of the re'iyah? Hainu b'dine mamanis, ubedine nefashos, she'ena edus miskayemes, ad sheboin lebezdin, b'shas re'iyah lo chashiva edus, because then we care about the moment when they come to verify, to testify, when they come to court. But when they actually see the event, they're not really edim at that point. Aval hacha b'kiddushin, listen to this, when it comes to Eidei Kiyum and Kiddushin, ein ha'edus ba'a la'ames hadavar bilvad, the purpose of the testimony is not to verify what took place. Ela afilu yodina and dahachi kushta de milsa shekidsha eina mekudeshes below edus. Even if we knew 100% that he gave her a ring and that she agreed, we believe them, it still wouldn't work. Or there were no edim, but there were krovim, because ein the kiddushin kiyum below edus. Without the presence of edus, by definition, it's not a kiddushin. Ugzeres kasuvu. He also says Gzeres HaKosuv. We're not sure what's the Gzeres HaKosuv. It's a Gemara. The Kivin de Cain, Shas Maisa, Hu Shas Edusan is just a spectacular Ra'ah, spectacular legal breakthrough. The Ra'ah says, even if the critical moment in all Edus is Bizman Haggadah Bebezdin, when you testify, when it comes to Eidei Kiyum, it's about the presence physically, right, at the time of the event. The Kivin Ikat Seir Psule Edus Simayim Edusam Betela. Dumi de Bialma Kashesh Tsur Psule Edus Kashabain Lahaid Bebezdin, She Edus Kulam Betela. Re'iyah in Kiddushin or in Ishus is the equivalent of Haggadah in Mamanis. This was the psak of the Ra'ah, Halacha Lamaisa. The Ra'ah was still alive at this time. They called him Neru. Halacha Lamaisa. Aval Einza Dasa Mefarshim. He says it's true, it's not the popular or most current view. V'roi lahachmir. The Ritva says, I think you should be machmir. I find the Ra'ah's argument very compelling. The Rashba doesn't seem to accept this, the Shitasa. So there's another point of the Ra'ah, but we'll continue with it next week. And that is what happens if you have Eidim present at a wedding or a divorce, but the protagonists don't know they're there. They're hiding
Were the-
machori ageder.
Right.
Does it work or not?
It should work.
So what the Ra'ah ends up saying, I'll read it to you next week. The Ra'ah says, listen, if Eidos was Eidei Birur, like regular Eidos, then probably you can make the case, it wouldn't be, even then you can make an argument that, people don't know witnesses are there, maybe they're not really serious, to put on. But that aside, it would work because you have verification, right? And you don't, but he says if they're validating presence, then the chassan and kala need to know they're there, because as far as they know, they're not really involved in a real
Right.
way.
But the problem is they're not going to take it seriously, so it's not going to create a.
That's a separate point, right? There are two
Yeah.
issues. One is a practical question. If I don't know that they're witnesses, am I really serious? That would,
Right.
no matter what you say about Eidei Kiyum, that might be a problem.
Right.
But what the Ra'ah says, again, which is so spectacular, is he says, forget about that. If the chassan and kala don't know they're there, even if they're there, they're not Eidei Kiyum, because part of the whole idea of Eidei Kiyum is the validate. If you don't know they're validating, then maybe they're not validating.
Got it.
Anyways, we'll continue with this
Right.
a little bit till next. I wanted to finish this topic next.
So Rabbi, just to be clear, we're on for the next couple of weeks, right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Even if
Thank
it's
you
the
so
same
much.
day,
We'll let you know.
Even if they
Thank you.
didn't sign without the
Have a good
knowledge.
night. Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.